Hey, Christina,
Hey, Susan.
what are we talking about today?
We are going to talk about section 1.5, measures of relative standing. And I think of measures of relative standing as like, what can I say about a data value in relation to the rest of the data set,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So the first thing here we're going to look at is percentiles, something we've all probably heard of. And that is the percentile. In general, you can say that p% of the data falls below the pth percentile. So in other
Oh,
words,
I like that. Let's make that in real words, okay?
okay. In other words, if I say that your child took a test and scored in the 80th percentile,
Yes.
that means that they did better than 80% of the people who took the test.
Yes. 80th percentile means 80% below that value.
Yes. Yeah. So it's only in relation to the rest of your sample or population.
Yes.
Okay. The quick way to calculate a percentile is given here in this first example in the notes. So if I had this data set, for example, of test scores, the percentile of the score of 53 would be the 10th percentile because there's 2 scores below 53 out of a total of 20 scores. And so 10% falls below that value.
Okay, because 2 divided by 20 times 100 is 10.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's the number below divided by the total number of in the sample multiplied by 100.
Yes.
Got it.
Yep. And so one thing that's related to percentiles actually is quartiles. So the quartiles divide the data into 4 equal groups of 25% rather than 100 equal groups of 1%.
Yeah.
And so the first quartile is the same thing as the 25th percentile. And so about 25% of the data will fall below the first quartile. And then your median, which we've already talked about as a measure of center, is really the same thing as the second quartile or the 50th percentile.
I like this.
Yeah. And then, so what percentile would the third quartile be?
75%.
Yes, it would be the 75th percentile. Right. So quartiles divide your data into 4 equal parts there. We call the 5-number summary the values that are listed here, the minimum value, Q1, the median, Q3, and the maximum. And we use those numbers, that 5-number summary, to do a couple of things. We can determine outliers is one thing. And
because we do care about, in stats, we care about outliers. Things that are unusual, we care about outliers.
Yes. And so we can use those values to determine outlier. And I'll show you those calculations here in a second. We can also make a graph that is called a box plot. Or, like I learned a long time ago, a box and whisker plot.
Yes, yes.
So using those values to determine outliers, we take the inner quartile range, which is Q3 minus Q1. It's the range of the middle 50%. And I use that in these calculations right here, okay? So if I take Q1 and subtract 1.5 times the interquartile range, then that gives me a cutoff, and anything below that is considered an outlier.
Yep.
And if I take Q3...
Yep, go up to the upper end of the box now. Go on up there to that upper end, Q3.
And I add 1.5 times the interquartile range.
Yes.
That gives me a cutoff, and anything higher than that is considered an outlier.
Yes.
So when you make a box plot, you can either make a box plot that shows outliers, okay, and I'll show you how to do this in StatCrunch.
Yes.
Okay. Or I can have a box plot that goes all the way out to the minimum and the maximum, and it doesn't necessarily show the outliers. Or there might not be outliers. not every data set has outliers.
True. It's true.
Yeah.
But it is helpful to know what the outliers are if they exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and one thing, going back to talking about measures of center, if I look at the box plot for a data set and it has outliers, then I would know that the median is going to be a better measure of center than the mean.
That's right.
Because
we talked about that the last time.
Yeah. Yesterday. It might have been yesterday.
Actually, it wasn't, because we've skipped a video. So we talked about it previously.
Oh, okay. It's been a couple days. Okay. So I have this data set here that's in your notes, and I just want to show you how to get the 5-number summary, the minimum, Q1, median, Q3, and max from StatCrunch. And then we can look at the box plot and see where our outliers are. And we can see that, based on these calculations here, that we only have one outlier. Okay. All right, so switch over to StatCrunch here.
And notice today she's put all the data in already. And I'm trying to copy those columns. We got it all in there.
Yep. Just being prepared.
Mm-hmm.
So, let me talk through that. I went to Stat and Summary, Stats, and Columns. Set my data in a column. I can hit variable 1. Now I can go through and pick the statistics, but actually all of the values in the 5-number summary are in this default statistics. Right. So I'm just going to hit compute. So I'm just going to
get a few extra things, but we can find the things we need.
Yep. So I have the median and the min and the max and the Q1 and the Q3. So the minimum value is 100.
Okay, I see that written in our notes. Okay.
Yep. The Q1 is 107.
Yep.
The median is 113.5.
Mm-hmm.
The Q3 is 122.
Mm-hmm.
Maximum value is 156.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so you can see if I subtract Q3 minus Q1, I get 15 for the interquartile range. There.
Those middle two quartiles, that's the width of those middle 2 quartiles.
Yep. And then I can also look at the graph here. If I go to graph and box plot, again, select my column. Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to keep this box checked that says use fences to identify outliers. Mm-hmm. I also like to draw the boxes horizontally, so I'm just going to click. Yeah. I don't like that vertical is the default, but okay. So now I have this box plot and I can see I have one outlier over here. And it's that value of 156.
That is quite the outlier. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So also just a word of warning about this box plot I'm going to scooch this over so we can see our critical values here. When I hover on the box plot, I can see the values for the interquartile range and the Q1 and the median and the Q3. Notice that lower limit says 100, not 84.5, which is what we got when we did our calculation. That's because StatCrunch is going to say the lowest value that's actually in the data set that's not an outlier. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then for the upper limit.
What you're saying is our data didn't even go down below 100.
Right.
So StatCrunch is not going to say the lower limit is 84.5. The lower limit is the lowest number you had.
Right.
Because we didn't get down too far. Okay.
Yeah. So it won't list a number there for our lower fence and our upper fence. It won't list a number that is like not in the data set.
So also what we're saying is if we ask you to calculate the lower fence and the upper fence, don't trust StatCrunch to tell you what they were.
Exactly.
You need to calculate them because 84.5 is the correct answer if we ask you what the lower fence is.
Yes. And same for the upper fence. We get 144.5. Well, there's nothing in the data set between 127 and 156. Mm-hmm. And so it lists 127 as the upper limit because that's the highest value in the data set that's not an outlier.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm glad you pointed that out.
Yeah. Because I just didn't want that to be confusing. Mm-hmm. All right. So And then in the notes, I have a copy of that box plot there, okay? There is one other thing that I think we should go over, Susan, from the homework.
Okay.
And I'm just going to pull this out here. In your 1.5 homework, this is question number 12. There is a sample of 24 patients, and you can copy and paste this data into StatCrunch. And then down here, it says to find the 5-number summary. Okay, so you'll get that from StatCrunch.
That's right.
And then it says what units would go on each of your answers above. So I just want that to be confusing. So if I look at the units, it's in milligrams per deciliter.
Yeah.
Okay, for the cholesterol levels.
Mhm.
So that's what it means by units there. Okay, so I'm just gonna type mg/dl. Okay.
Okay.
And so then down here where you're putting your answer in the first box and the correct units in the second box, that's what you're going to put for your units in each of those boxes.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. And here you can see the terminology here, lower fence. That's that lower critical value, Q1 minus 1.5 times interquartile range.
Mm-hmm.
The upper fence will be what you get when you do Q3 plus 1.5 times interquartile range.
Okay.
Okay. Do you have anything else? That's all I got.
I think that's it.
All right. See you next time.
Okay.